Right. So, to whoever's finding this, this is a caveat. This may or may not resonate with you. Resonate meaning you find that it seems to confirm inside of you what you've already been looking for. If it doesn't confirm what you've already looking for, then you're better off looking somewhere else. I have for 16 years, non-stop, been searching for the answers that have plagued me all my life, because all my life I knew something was not quite right. Something was deeply disturbing about the reality that we find ourselves in. The book that I've found here is by Rudi Berner. This is a German fella. He calls it A Word, a journey to the height of philosophy. I mean, there's a lot of work has gone into this book. It goes in detail into many things that we found out in the first chapters. The sort of awakening that we've all gone through on the outside, all the things that we find out when we first stumble across the first lies. Luckily, this has translated for me. I know what happened to the last translation that I put in. It vanished, so I'm going to work away why I have this translation, because if you remember, I did something similar and the translation just untranslated itself on my hard drive, which is very interesting. So I'm going to dive into certain bits here. I am going to focus specifically on this third chapter here, who is the good God. The rest is all basically discussing things, as I just mentioned, what's happening in our world, the first sort of deep rabbit holes you fall into. I know there's a lot of other channels who have come to the same conclusion as I have now come to. This was just my last nugget that I needed, the last bit of confirmation. Make of it what you want. It's either for you or it isn't. I'm putting this out because it's a labor of my love. I have promised when I first started seeking that whatever I would find, I would faithfully share, which I've always done. Almost all people stumble upon the truth at some point in their lives. Most people quickly get up, dust themselves off, and rush about their business as if nothing has happened. And believe it or not, you are stumbling upon the truth at this very moment. Yes, I mean you who is currently reading these lines. Aha, I can tell you're suspicious, the truth. Anyone could come along and claim that they are in possession of the truth. Well, I agree with you, the truth is such a thing. It's a thing because the truth appears to be quite broad. And why is the truth so broad? Because people's consciousness is different. What one person has recognized as truth only causes another to shake their head in disbelief. What one person has become aware of is for another in the realm of utopia and fairy tales. There's also the fact that truth cannot be proven. Ultimately, nothing in our universe can be proven. In the end, not even scientists can prove the formulas and laws they have put forward, the reason why our world supposedly works, to be absolutely true. And they constantly fall from one explanationary scenario to the other. And something like God cannot be proven at all. So you see, there's a very close connection between truth and consciousness. It is actually the case that truth only ever proves itself through appropriate awareness. And this fact makes the matter, and therefore our world, extremely complicated and torn. For that same reason, they crucified the avatar Jesus, yeah? You can actually put this yourself into the Google Translate. What you need to do is download this as a PDF file and then insert it into Google Translate, which gives you an option here to translate documents, okay? And then you download the translation and cross your fingers so it stays translated. So chapter 3, I just want to focus on this. He goes in depth into all sorts of different other things that actually lead to eventually the question, who is the loving God? Should not be dear God, the loving God. So dear friends, now we are going up and all the way up as far as humans are capable of thinking. It is often claimed, mostly by church authorities, that God is incomprehensible and unimaginable for humans. This is a huge mistake. As far as God's omnipotence and greatness is concerned, man certainly cannot grasp and understand this. However, what concerns us is his nature, i.e. what he is like. And that is very accessible to man, since every person is a part of God. I told you the thing that we're finding out now, science is finding out, we're in a holographic projection. A hologram consists out of a big picture, and if you take any part of that picture, the whole big picture is contained in that, albeit corrupted, because the more you snip it apart, the more corrupt the reflection becomes. The picture becomes more and more unsharp, which is an important something to understand, that it's only the whole picture that is glass clear. The little parts, the more they get split up, the more corrupt they become. In order to understand what follows, you must be receptive in some way so that the information can flow into you. Take a moment to take a look at the following words of wisdom and let them go, get you into the mood. Maybe there are better times, but these are not ours. Jean-Paul Sartre. People do not stumble over mountains, but over moleheads. Confucius. Whenever you share the opinion of the majority, it's time to reflect. Mark Twain. Religion without philosophy is sentimentality and sometimes even fanaticism, and philosophy without religion is intellectual speculation. Srila Prabhupada. The miracle is not a contradiction to the laws of nature, but a contradiction to what we know about these laws. Augustine. Experience is like the sun, it makes the flowers wither, but the fruit ripens. Salvatore Dali. Time is a great teacher. It is just a shame that she kills her students. Kurt Goetz. We are on earth to seek happiness, not to find it. We always live for the future, eternal tuning, and the concert never begins. That's so true, because we're in time, you see. The true nature of God exists outside of time, in the ever-present moment, which is bliss. To get to the source, you have to swim against the current. Confucius. It's easier to believe a lie you've heard 100 times than a truth you've never heard. That's why people are running from this message. They don't want to know. They have this perception about what God is, and if you come and really start to question that, they have no answers. At this point, I have to tell you a little about something about my life, because it is no coincidence that I take the liberty of informing you about God. As long as my memory of this life goes back, there has rarely been a day when I haven't cursed this world more or less violently. When I woke up early in the morning, even as a very small child, I knew instinctively that this was not the world into which I belonged. It was never a question for me whether there is such a thing as God. The fact that God exists was always a given for me. As I can very well remember that even as a small child, I philosophized about him in my thoughts. Two themes dominated my early childhood philosophical thoughts. First of all, I was interested in how he lives like that, and what trick he uses to overcome his loneliness, since he is everything. But this basically also means complete loneliness. As you can see, it was clear to me back then that God must be a personality. I came to the conclusion that God must have the ability to divide his everything into many different personalities. Through these countless personalities, he can enjoy his divine existence. At the time, I didn't know how much this idea would turn out to be true, almost half a century later. The second thing that occupied me intensely was my certainty that something was wrong with the world I was born into. Something terrible must have happened. I saw images in the media of people beating each other to death, shooting each other to death, and torturing each other to death. Pictures of people emaciated to the bone and simply starving. A war had come to an end in which almost the entire world was involved in murder and manslaughter. I leafed through illustrated history books and quickly realized that murder and manslaughter have always ruled this world, at least as far back as the books in history. And the books I look into went way back into our history. The Vikings killed everyone, the Huns killed everyone, the Israelites killed everyone, the Romans killed everyone, the Greeks killed everyone, the Swedes killed blah, right? And those who were not slain were killed by starvation, typhus, plague, cholera, poison, and atomic bombs. No, something couldn't be right here. An almighty God who was said everywhere to be the dear God, the loving God, could not be responsible for something like that, or does it? No, definitely not, because there were people and institutions who stated very empathetically that this had everything to do with evil and nothing to do with God. Strange, I thought, since he is everything, he must also be evil. People and institutions are screaming in my face. Stop, my friend, don't sin against God. People are all sinners, they have a great debt. Aha, so we are to be blamed for something. Yes, that's the case. What exactly are we to be blamed for, may I ask? People have been cast out by God because they have sinned against him. Please forgive my intrusiveness. It thunders at me. But what was our sin? Disobeying commandments. It thunders at me. Funny, as long as I can remember, I have always obeyed everything that was taught to me and taught me. Right, something seems to be missing here. That wasn't it either. But your ancestors, so it's now communicated to me, original sin. Do you understand? Have you inherited this guilt? And now enough questions. There's also a book that has everything in it. And I look at what is happening around me and in the world, and actually all people who are believers believe that they are born sinners and therefore must atone. In the church, the women beat their chest and scream, which means something like, my fault, my excessive guilt. This is corrupt here. We get the picture. We've all been there. We've all asked ourselves this question. What's going on Earth can't be true. Are people really so stupid or narrow-minded that they don't realize what they're doing here on Earth in the name of God or the Almighty? And then I came across a sentence that was uttered by someone who often, obviously, hates and abuses. Give them a God and give them a book, and you can humiliate and dominate them at will. When I read this sentence, it was immediately clear to me that this sentence was not just said, but that this sentence fitted exactly to the reality on Earth, and therefore the dark ideology behind it already been put into practice. The churches, the religious communities, the religious fanatics, and last but not least money, had the believing people in an iron grip, and that hasn't changed much to this day. Only the previously open call for murder in the name of God has turned into insidiousness and hypocrisy. Because what had once been an intrusive hunch about my immortality was transformed into knowledge by a massive near-death experience I had at the age of 17. I now had a significant problem. I have already explained to you that knowledge cannot be compared with belief at all. Believing means not knowing anything. Believing always leaves all options open. Knowledge, on the other hand, is always absolutely so, irrefutable. When a person, through whatever experience, changes belief into knowledge, his consciousness immediately changes. As a person of knowledge, you are no longer the same person as before, as strange as this sounds. Consciousness changes radically through the knowledge experienced. Many people believe that they have an immortal soul. I know it. And I know that I am that soul. I can only smile at discussions about whether there is life after death. I know that there is. On the other hand, I can also empathize very well with believing people and understand that they can only believe at the moment they are skeptical. Real knowledge usually comes from personal experience, so it is difficult for a person to develop through listening or reading alone. However, certain experiences, individual knowledge can when presented in the correct context by any source, book, speech, lead to new expanded knowledge. And there is another most interesting source for gaining knowledge, your soul, i.e. yourself. Since your soul, i.e. you, has already lived and experienced many lives, an enormous amount of knowledge is stored within. I've already informed you that your soul exists and lives on several levels, earth, astral world, mental world, at the same time. And on the higher vibrational levels, corresponding to the respective level, is the total knowledge of the soul available. So all that remains is to find a way to be able to tap into this latent knowledge in early life. However, this happens all by itself at the right time through intuition. In such a case, we speak of an inspiration, when in a few cases the knowledge of the soul shines through into earthly life with all its might and power. Then this leads to something that we call enlightenment. Enlightenment does not come directly from God, but primarily from the soul, from yourself. So philosophical endeavor is a serious inquiry and not stopping to ask questions until you get your answers. So I guess we've all been there, haven't we? Asking these questions. Back to my problem. So I knew I was immortal, and I was convinced that there was something that created me, God, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with this loving God. War, misery, hunger, illness, torture, murder, manslaughter on earth do not exactly speak for a loving God who's all-powerful, and certainly doesn't need to create something so terrible. But there was still the matter of our guilt, which I couldn't find anywhere with the best in the world. And yes, there was another topic that occupied me extremely intensively, our free will, which we are supposed to have. Even back in my early years, I had a slight inkling that this free will was not as free as it was often propagated, but that it did not exist at all and was practically an illusion, which would become clear much later in my life, and I will make it very clear to you that this is actually the case. In any case, even in my youth, I was at war with God and his failed creation, and as time went on, I became more and more desperate and frustrated. And what does a person do in such a situation? He tries to best to somehow forget all this crap and throws himself headlong into addictions, poisons, and passions. And that's exactly what I did, sometimes almost to excess. You already know what addictions, poisons, and passions are all about, and there's actually no need to say this after this phrase. I felt even worse than before. I somehow managed to get the hang of things in time, as they say, but I was pretty much at my wit's end. I'm going to scroll slowly. He talks about magic here. You can pause this and read for yourself, because I want to really focus on the things that he describes later on. This why, yeah, this is so important. Why this question, which seems rather inconspicuous at first glance, is the key to the highest knowledge to God. You just have to apply this why consistently, and you must never allow yourself to be fobbed up with any dogmas. But people always allow themselves to be fobbed up with dogma, and they have always been fobbed off with it in the past. If a person who suffers on earth asks why he has to suffer, the answer he receives is, now you might say that might well, because you're a sinner, yeah? Now you might say that may well be the case, but how many people do you think there are who suffer from any kind of, oh, this is all muddled, isn't it? Any kind of, oh, it's so sad. I won't be fobbed off with a statement like that. Oh, no, because you're a sinner. People who suffer, religious associations, churches, sects, worlds, are fobbed off with this statement, and that they fully accept the answer that they are sinners. There's billions of them, and all those believers who think you gotta I'm sorry, this is all muddled up, but you can find your way through these passages. And all those believers who think a little further and are interested in esoteric things inevitably come across the law of karma. What you sow, you will reap, and allow themselves to be fobbed off with that as well, because they don't consider that the laws of karma require a first negative act. Otherwise, this law won't ever come into effect. And those who actually ask about the first negative act are fobbed off with the fall of a high angel of light who dragged us all into sin. And if you ask the question why the high angel of light once fell, you'll be fobbed off with the answer. And if you ask further why he rebelled, fobbed off with the answer because he rebelled. And if you ask any further why he rebelled against God, then you get the answer. God, there's lots of things missing here. Because he rebelled against, because he became arrogant. When with God there's unity, perfection, and eternal Jesus. This is not good, is it? Eternal happiness. Oh God, this is really not good. So he's asking a series of questions. Obviously, the answers are because he became arrogant. Well, why is this when God is unity, perfection, and eternal happiness? Yeah. They have no answers for these questions. So you see, the little word why has tremendous power, and it frees you from a very great evil that dominates all believing people. It frees you from humility. Take a close look at believers around the world, how they crawl, kneel, plead, pray, sacrifice, cower, and live in fear of God, because preaching is happening everywhere. As for me, even though I know that he exists, I no longer have any humility before God. Mama, I'm not arrogant either. I have a very deep longing for peace, freedom, and eternal happiness, the natural right of every living being, and I have the courage to ask him directly, and I know that he can't answer me at the moment, as crazy as that may sound at the moment. If you want to know something, don't go to the blacksmith, go to the blacksmith. Oh God, this is not good. I explain where you go to the source. Basically, if you want to know something about something, you're going to the source. I will briefly explain the deeper meaning of this saying, because it is quite interesting to know. Nowadays, the profession of a blacksmith is nothing special. In fact, it is often classified as a low-level craft. However, that wasn't always the case. There was a time when the armorer was one of the most respected citizens in a community. Those were the times when the sword ruled and decided wars. The armorer was always a close confidant of the king. Really good armorers had magical abilities. Anyone who was familiar with the element of fire and knew his magical secrets could actually forge victory into a weapon using their will. Weaponsmiths were secret keepers and possessed magical knowledge. This is the real reason why popular wisdom sends a seeker to the blacksmith. So if you want to know something, don't waste your time with people who basically know nothing. Go to the one who has knowledge. In my case, God was the blacksmith. If anyone could answer the question, it was he. With all my willpower, I mentally screamed at him cyclically. I have already told you several times that you should be careful what you think about, because thoughts should not be underestimated, and especially those thoughts that are carried out with full willpower. And lo and behold, according to the ancient saying, whoever knocks, the door will be opened. After a relatively short time, I achieved the highest knowledge. I came across the Vedic writings, the Vedas for short. Veda means knowledge in the same sense of wisdom, truth. The Vedas are books of wisdom. When we speak of knowledge below, we always mean wisdom. Again, I won't read all of this. I'll just read passages that get us through this as quickly as possible. So the Vedas are a gigantic amount of knowledge. 100,000 double verses. When the earth enters the dark ages, Kali Yuga, which is the case around 5,000 years ago, then the Vedic knowledge must be written down, since people then lose their cosmic connection and thus the gigantic ability to remember, which is already mentioned happened about around 5,000 years ago. The Vedas are written in the original Sanskrit. This language is dying out, only few people speak it. The basic study of this language alone requires around 12 years. The Vedic literature is divided into two main categories: the Shruti, hearing, and Smriti, remembering. The Shruti scriptures include the four original Vedas: Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda, Yajur Veda, and the 108 Upanishads. The Smritis include the explanatory writings of the Vedas called Puranas, then the most powerful epic in the world, the Mahabharata, 100,000 double verses, and the epic Ramayana. Then there is the Vedanta Sutra, the goal of all knowledge, which is a summary of Vedic knowledge. There's a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, the Srimad Bhagavatam. This commentary alone comprises 12 volumes and consists of a total of 18,000 verses. And last but not least, there is the Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God. The Bhagavad Gita is an excerpt from the epic Mahabharata, or rather its climax. The whole thing is pretty complicated and of unimaginable scope, isn't it? It is unimaginable scope, right? You can go to the palm leaf library in India and have your horoscope read, because the Brahmins who wrote down this knowledge 5,000 years ago knew who would come in the future and want to know their little horoscope, right? They were still connected. Kim Peek taught himself to read at the right. Okay. First of all, we should mention the person who wrote down the entire Vedic knowledge around 5,000 years ago. It was Srila Vyasadeva. He is called the literary incarnation of God. Srila Vyasadeva appeared because he knew that the Kali Yuga, the age of absolute darkness, was dawning for us humans. However, in order to maintain the universal law of he who seeks, he finds, the highest knowledge on earth must always be presented in some form and also accessible. Kim Peek took him... People with such an ability to remember are called savants, which translates into knowers. US-based Kim Peek, for example, is one such savant. Kim Peek taught himself to read at the age of 16 months, and by the age of 4, he already knew 4 volumes of an encyclopedia by heart. He now has 12,000 books stored in his memory, word for word. Again, I'll just scroll. There is no important area that is not covered and explained in the Vedas, so that you get a vague overview of the gigantic knowledge that the Vedas contain. Here are a few areas. Described in the Vedas are Ayurveda, highest knowledge of medicine, holistic healing, diets, medicinal herbs, baths, cures. Yajur Veda, highest knowledge about astronomy, astrology, connection between cosmic and earthly circumstances. Purana cosmology, highest knowledge about the universe, age, structure, properties. Vima Veda, highest knowledge about planetary and interplanetary flying objects with properties that are largely unknown to us, construction, drives, alloys. Sthapatya Veda, supreme knowledge of architecture and construction. Danu Veda, supreme knowledge of the art of fighting weaponry. Sankhya, highest knowledge about analysis and structure of matter. Silpa Sastra, supreme knowledge of mathematics, geometry, formulas. Natya Sastra, highest knowledge of dramaturgy, expressive dance, theater, etc. Gandharva Vidya, supreme knowledge of music, singing instruments. Samskriti, supreme knowledge of language, arts, grammar, metrics, poetry, etc. Sounds incredible what information the Vedas contain, doesn't it? I mean, compare that to the little book, the Bible, which is watered down version of all of this, all right? I found this, which I'm going to stick the links below. This is the Vedic Cosmos. This is the IXCON. they're a community that keeps Vedic traditions and Vedic knowledge alive. And these are just a few comments by physicists. As in Hindu mythology, it is a continual dance of creation and destruction involving the whole cosmos, the basis of all existence and of all natural phenomenon. So they are actually confirming what is written in the Vedic teachings. Long before it became a scientific aspiration to estimate the age of the Earth, many elaborate systems of the world chronology had been devised by the sages of antiquity. The most remarkable of these occult timescales is that of the ancient Hindus, because they have closest calculated the age of the universe and the age of the Earth. Indian cosmologists, the first to estimate the age of the Earth at more than 4 billion years, they came the closest to modern ideas of atomism, quantum physics, etc. To the philosophers of India, however, relativity is no new discovery, just as the concept of light years is no matter for astonishment to people used to thinking of time in millions of kalpas. A kalpa is about 4,320,000 years, right? Let alone the architecture and the encoding in the architecture. So they talk about Angkor Wat here. I just want to run this a little bit.
What is its background? How is it created? How is it conserved? And under whose control is all this being done?
Many millennia ago, an advanced civilization, the mystery of the origin and nature of the cosmos. The term Vedic refers to the civilization of ancient India. Angkor Wat, the world's largest temple complex, with walls nearly 1/2 mile on each side, was built between 1112 and 1150 AD in Cambodia. Astronomy and Vedic cosmology are inseparably entwined at Angkor Wat. The central towers represent Mount Meru, the cosmic axial mountain. The 5 internested rectangular outer walls and moats indicate chains of mountains enclosing the world and the cosmic oceans beyond. Science Journal noted that Angkor Wat had encoded precise calendrical, historical, and cosmological themes into the architectural plan for the temple. As many as 18 astronomical alignments have been identified within its walls. Rarely in history has any culture given rise to a structure that so elaborately and expansively incorporates its concept of the cosmos. Similar integration of cosmology and architecture is seen in the massive Indonesian temple at Borobudur. The temple was laid out using the ancient method of Vastu Purusha Mandala. This square diagram harmonizes architecture with the annual movements of the celestial realm. The temple was constructed sometime around 775 AD.
It's because they had cosmic knowledge. And because they had cosmic knowledge, they knew that the cosmos would slip into this darkness, and they knew it had to be preserved, which is why they wrote down what they wrote down. Learning consists of remembering information that has been there for generations. It resides in the soul of man. And it's no surprise that this is coming now back to the surface, right? Take another look at the above list of Vedic knowledge. The Ayurveda is listed there. Ayurveda is the highest knowledge of medicine and healing. What's the latest hit in all pharmacies and relevant circles? Ayurveda. Although this knowledge is, as one would expect, commercialized, largely adulterated and often misapplied, it still originates from Vedic knowledge. Again, I'll just scroll. This is about Sri Prabhupada, who founded the Society for Krishna Consciousness. You can pause and read. I know a lot of things here are a bit corrupt. What you can do, I think, is if you go in the original text and take a passage that's so corrupted and stick it back into Google Translate, it might clear it up for you, because all the ones that I lifted from the document were translated properly. I'm going to break this up into little chunks because this is the first really interesting bit here that I'm coming to that needs to be maybe put in a separate little video. This is where he discusses the fundamental orientation of people, i.e. There's theism, monoism, dualism, deism, nihilism, pantheism, atheism, and he makes an argument about these different factions, and I'll stick that in the first sort of separate little block.